Welcome back. It's been a while. I even had to look for my microphone because I wasn't sure where it was. And because it's also been a while since I've done one of these, I thought I would have a look at the shit they talk in question time. Break it down for everybody. So I downloaded Wednesdays, I believe the 5th of February 2020. But conveniently life got in the way and I couldn't get to it as quickly as I wanted to. But that gave time for friendly Geordies to explain why Scott Morrison should be in prison, which is great because everything he says in that is so relevant to this, and I'm going to use this as an opportunity to also say well done to the efforts for the Animal Rescue Collective they've set up to help all the animal shelters looking after animals affected by bushfires and such. I think it's almost like 130k. Well done. And all the links will be below this video. Now that video he does shows a lot of how he fucked up in the last election, which if you've been watching this channel for a while, you could tell that I've been yelling about how this government has absolutely screwed us all over. It's in the numbers. I've got receipts. I could show you. And I do. And I will. And so just to further prove why ScoMo for prison, let's debunk some of the shit he chats from last Wednesday.
Questions without notice. The Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Prime Minister, and I refer to my November letter to him calling for 8 measures on bushfires, including a coordinated national approach endorsed by COAG, appropriate emergency services funding, more aerial firefighting assets, financial support for volunteer firefighters and action on climate adaptation and mitigation. Why did the Prime Minister summarily dismiss Labor's constructive proposals by rejecting a national approach to the crisis, saying COAG might meet later, quote, should the need arise?
Alright, first thing to bring you all into the loop. COAG is the Council of Australian Governments. It is the peak of intergovernmental forum in Australia, which is obviously just all the state governments and federal governments, how they would meet and work on things together. And let's continue on.
The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'm sure the House won't be surprised that I don't accept the Leader of the Opposition's characterisation of these issues, Mr Speaker, because what I can tell the House is the government's response to the national bushfire emergency over this black summer has been, Mr Speaker, unprecedented.
Alright, and quickly, first things first, what do you mean you reject the characterisation of that? He quoted you. Did you not want all the governments to get together or not, you chud? And unprecedented doesn't mean a good thing. It just means it hasn't been called for before. It hasn't been done before. And if the fires have never been this bad, then no shit. Anything else to do with it are going to be unprecedented because the fires were unprecedented. And leaving your country while the whole thing is burning and you're the leader of that country is an unprecedented fuckhead move, isn't it? Alright, we should probably carry on.
Unprecedented with the compulsory call-out of the Defence Force Reserves, which is the first time, Mr Speaker, the first time that has occurred, Mr Speaker, in response to a national disaster of this kind.
Oh, you know I love how he brings that up as the first thing. We sent in the military though. You can't say we don't give a shit. Yeah, well the military, the Defence Force, is the only thing you can get behind when it comes to spending. Let's have a little look. Oh, that number goes up. What do you know? And then the category underneath it, public order and safety, that is a considerably smaller number. And it goes down. I told myself not to dwell on each little thing.
In addition to that, Mr Speaker, we moved quickly to establish the National Bushfire Recovery Agency, Mr Speaker, and to appoint Andrew Colvin, the former head of the Australian Federal Police, Mr Speaker, which I thought those opposite supported these measures, Mr Speaker, but they come in here on the first question of the day and seek to politicise the bushfire response.
Oh my God. I am so sick of these people and this stupid shit they say. Politicising the bushfire response? Mate, you're politicians. For fuck's sake. That's what you do. That's the point of you. You politicise things. Oh my fucking God. And I've noticed that's something they do everywhere. Politics all over the globe. Oh, don't politicise the thing I really don't want to talk about because I'm probably doing a god-awful job with it.
Now, I
Member for
find that very
Isaacs.
disappointing, but I'm happy to inform the member that we not only provided additional support for aerial firefighting assets, that is the water bombers, but we actually provided a further $20 million,
The Prime
Mr.
Minister
Speaker.
will resume his seat.
The Friendly Geordies video also does a good job at talking about all the bullshit with the aircrafts and having to share with other countries. And, you know, I would just assume that Australia should be fully decked out with firefighting equipment. Never would I imagine would have to be like, Canada, help us out. You'd think we'd be on top of that, but another thing that involves the people, so don't worry about it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We provided the additional funding for those water bombers, and then we provided additional funding on top of that in response to the request from the fire chiefs who had sought that additional support. They sought 1 extra. We provided 4 extra, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I note the constant interjecting from the Leader of the Opposition, and he's been very chatty on this issue today, Mr. Speaker. I would have thought that he would be supporting these measures. If he wants to politicise bushfires, that reflects more on him than it does on the government, Mr. Speaker.
Again, like I already said, you're politicians. It's what you're meant to do. Secondly, he's your opposition. The general idea of him is to oppose what you do, especially when it's really fucking bad. And I just want to quickly state for the record, especially for this next bit coming up, I'll chop out the bullshit where the speaker is just trying to get order in the house and just useless bits. But especially with this particular video, I have not changed the order of anything. I have left the questions as they are and just cut out when they're sitting down and standing up, really. So keep that in mind.
Member for Cowper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Will the Prime Minister outline to the House how the Morrison-McCormack government is working practically to meet the challenges Australia faces, including responding to the devastation this bushfire season has caused for communities across Australia, including in my electorate of Cowper?
The Prime Minister has the call.
Chair, I thank the member for Cowper for his questions, and I note the interjections from those opposite, again, on the issue of an important question about bushfires.
See what I mean? I'm not kidding. I didn't mess with this at all. That is the order of events that happened in this question time. What a fucking joke, isn't it? So, is politicizing it, which is kind of the whole point of your position, even though you say it as if it's meant to be a negative thing when the other side brings it up. But if your side brings it up, oh, what a great question. How rude of the other side to interrupt when we're talking about such an important issue like bushfires. Are you fucking kidding me?
Mr. Speaker, I was with the member for Cowper in Wauchope during those bushfires that ravaged the mid-coast, as I was with other members across the mid-coast and up the north coast as they went through those communities, and I saw the devastation with him and my many other colleagues as we visited the many areas that are affected by those fires, including with the New South Wales Premier, who was there with me on that occasion as we went to Wauchope and we visited the Incident Response Centre. And I want to thank all the members for their great cooperation and support, as we did in this House yesterday when we commemorated and when we memorialised, Mr. Speaker, the terrible losses that were endured over this bushfire season, this black summer, Mr. Speaker, and one that continues to this day.
See, when people talk about ScoMo going into the communities affected by bushfires, they like to go for the savage, unwelcomed handshake that he forces upon people for photo ops. But this is one I really think people should not forget. This one really shows the kind of person our Prime Minister is. Like, let me just quickly add, I know people that consume no news, do not really take in any form of information, and they still knew what happened on Kangaroo Island. And it's not even their job to know.
I was thinking about firefighters and I know the fellow was down in his car. That's
They try to outrun the fire, I think.
Yeah.
And we might just move
Yep,
on
no,
to the next
please
great.
go.
Thanks,
Yeah,
guys.
thanks.
Well, good on you. Nice to meet you.
But what this government has been doing for the last 6 years has been ensuring that the government has been in a place to build the strength and resilience, particularly of our financial resources, to ensure that at a time of crisis we can act.
Oh my fucking god. This broke me. This fucking broke me. What he said just there, I am speechless. It's not what you want to be when you're in front of a microphone. And if we were financially sorted, then why would you have to announce additional funding all the fucking time? If we were ready to act, why do we need other countries' aircrafts? A line that these chads like to use a lot. Fires aren't new to Australia, which, as I say, every time they say that, then why the fuck aren't we more prepared for them? Remember this thing? Remember this little thing here? This is part of the reason why this channel even exists, because I was just reading the budget, minding my own damn business, seeing where my taxpayer money was going, and I was quite shocked to see that we weren't putting a little bit aside for the inevitable natural disaster. And that one's old. I had to update it, and it's the same. And then wondering why it's like that. Oh, you created this disaster relief funding arrangement, huh? So we're gonna have Angus Taylor write the agreement, which chucks in all natural disasters and terror attacks into the same category, and then have Peter Dutton as the head minister that oversees it all. And who should we put in charge of everything? The ex-head of the Australian Federal Police? Like, no doubt, law enforcement has its place in these disaster situations, but I feel like we should kind of come at it from a different angle. But anyways, I don't want to go off track too much, so let's carry on.
And in a time of crisis, we can move forward and put resources into place, and that's why we established the National Bushfire Recovery Agency under the leadership of Andrew Colvin, and to immediately put in an initial $2 billion to support the bushfire recovery effort and the rebuilding process to build back better, which this government will lead and ensure we're supporting those people on the ground. And we were able to do that, Mr Speaker, without applying an emergency levy and tax on the Australian people. We didn't have to do that like our predecessors did, Mr Speaker, because we were in a position to do so because we have brought the budget back into balance. That is something those opposite were unable to do, and the only way they could provide that support is if they tax other Australians. Now, we have not done that, Mr Speaker.
What do you mean emergency tax? If my taxpayer money isn't already going towards helping out when shit hits the fan, then what the fuck am I paying tax for? So I can put solar panels on fucking golf clubs and fucking subsidize fuel for mining companies?
Because we did the work to ensure that we rebuild the...
I originally stopped the video here to talk about something else to do with the economy and natural disaster recovery, but I think I've covered that pretty thoroughly, so I'm just going to take this opportunity to point out builded, he said, builded. Like, I'm usually not this petty, but when you're a leader of a country, you could probably at least know the word built. Come on.
Financial resilience of the government to be able to act to provide $76 million in important mental health support, to ensure that we're providing $50,000 grants to small businesses directly impacted by these fires, and a further $500,000 in loans where you don't pay anything back for 2 years, no interest, and then discounted rates of interest over the balance of the 8 years, to ensure that we're providing $70,000 grants, Mr Speaker, $75,000 grants to primary producers, and more than $6 million of that support is already out the door, that we've provided over $100 million in the disaster recovery payments to over 75,000 people, and including over 34,000 children, to ensure that they could be supported, particularly as they went back into school, that we've supported our tourism industry, that we've supported those who are supporting wildlife and habitat, and the council's providing the response. That's action, that's the response.
Time has concluded.
There's so much I could say about this, but I'll just keep it short. How's that for a helping hand? Oh, you're fucked over by a bushfire? Here, we'll give you a loan, with not much interest at the start, and then, you know, like, go fuck yourself.
Leader of the Opposition.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. And my question is again addressed to the Prime Minister. Does the Prime Minister regret using his official resources to create and launch a party political advertisement on a catastrophic day at the height of the bushfire crisis, which included defence imagery, a jingle and a link to a Liberal Party donation button?
Yeah, let's have a look at that ad, since we paid for it, and then I'll show you how I fixed the ad for them.
Authorised by S. Morrison, Liberal Party, Canberra. Authorised by S. Morrison, Liberal Party, Canberra.
The Leader of the Opposition has come to that dispatch box and told a complete falsehood. Mr. Speaker,
Members on my left.
the government and the members opposite know, Mr. Speaker, on any... I note the constant interjections on matters of bushfires, Mr. Speaker, from those opposite. But on every piece of communication that you provide in video, the advice is that that material must be authorised, Mr. Speaker. And I have noted that the Leader of the Opposition...
Prime Minister, just pause for a second.
Probably shouldn't have linked a donation button to your party on the ad where you just flex the military in response to the bushfires, which is not politicising them at all in any way. Nah. But putting a donation button to your party when people might possibly think they're going to be donating to the bushfire relief, that's a fuckhead move.
Speaker, those communications require an authorisation to be compliant, and that's what the government has done. That's what the Leader of the Opposition has done, Mr. Speaker, with his video communications on these types of issues. Mr. Speaker, the only people trying to politicise the response to the bushfire crisis is the Leader of the Opposition.
Fuck you. Yeah, fuck you. Seriously, fuck this guy. Well, that's enough of this. This isn't good for the brain taking in too much of this bullshit, so we'll end it there. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, become a patron, send an email to your member of parliament and politely call them a fuckhead if they're supporting these bullshit policies. Have a good one.